So welcome. Delighted to see you. I'm John McIntyre. I'm a prof in the business school, Scheller College of Business. So it's great to see you. We've got till about 12:15. We have 4 speakers. And we have titled the presentation today, Looking Under the Hood of FrenchTech Ecosystem, Best Practices and Lessons Learned in the US. I'm going to be speaking in English. I'm assuming not all of you are French students from the Metz campus. In this regard, I want to introduce a colleague of mine. Some of you might know him, Bernard Kiplin, who is a French-American professor and also the VP for International Initiatives. And this is a gentleman who oversees the overseas campuses. So if you have any complaints or issues, you should direct those issues to him. So this is Bernard here. You want to say a word or two, real quick?
I would like to welcome you, and it's nice to meet you. So as John said, I'm the new Vice Provost for International Initiatives. We are really delighted to have you here on campus, and looking forward to the events today. I'd like to thank John and his colleagues for putting this together, as well as all the panelists and speakers today. Thanks for coming. And international activity and internationalization is one of our priorities on campus. And we live in a world that is increasingly global and global digital economy. And so nowadays, you can't be well prepared without an international experience. And so it's great to be part of events like today. So as John said, if you have complaints, you should come and find me. But if you have ideas, and if you want to actually, if you have suggestions or plans that can help our international activities, please also look at me as somebody who can provide resources and somebody who can support some of your innovative ideas. So thank you again.
Well, I've been here a long time. I remember when we did not have a campus in France, 1987, 88, 89, and I remember the early stages, so it's great to see you, given the COVID crisis, to see as many of you here, having sort of crossed the pond and joined us on the main campus. So without any further ado, let me introduce our speakers, and they're all very qualified, and part of the purpose of the exercise today is for you to meet them and for them to meet you. Because they of course, have job potentials and idea potentials. So it's an opportunity to do that as well. At the end of the proceedings, around 12:15, we have a bunch of pizza that's coming this way, and you're welcome to have a bite to eat. And it's a chance to meet and mingle. So without further ado, we have 4 speakers, and in order of presentation, the first one would be the guy who represents the government, to some extent, and Rami, who is here. Rami has a impressive and distinguished academic profile. Not only is he a famed polytechnicien, we all know what that means. By the way, I am French by birth, so don't be fooled by the name. Not only is he a famed polytechnician, and I think he's a graduate of one of the Minettes, or one of the mines principales. Okay. But he also did a PhD and an MS at our neighbor to the south, the Georgia Tech of the North, called MIT. So he's worked for the Ministry of Economics in France for maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe more. Yeah, and now he's the Attaché for Science and Technology, located in Atlanta, in the southeast. And he has been a very active head of program. I'm really quite impressed by what he has done. Quite aware of the range of French connections in science and technology throughout the southern region, the southeast region, which includes all of the states represented in the French consulate, the circonscription, which includes 5 or 6 states. So he's a busy guy, sort of on the road all the time as much as he can, preaching the gospel of French technology and its merits. So without further ado, I'll let him go through his presentations. There isn't much time. Obviously, this could be the topic of an entire day's conference. But the idea principally is to meet you, meet them, and get a feel for what they do and the lessons that we may learn from their experience. So please go ahead. I think, can I see a show of hands? Is everybody French-speaking in the audience or not? Are you French-speaking?
Yeah, French.
Okay, everybody's French-speaking. Donc, on peut peut-être passer au français. C'est comme...
Who is not French-speaking?
No, you're not French-speaking. Okay, Alain is not French-speaking, so...
What? All right, I'm not.
Yeah, I was told I wasn't French this morning because of my name, so it kind of surprised me, but anything's possible. Okay, so you decide whichever language or...
Not everyone speaks French, right?
Everybody does, yeah. Everybody does. No? Yeah? No. No, in English.
So thank you, John, for the presentation. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. See you. So, John said I represent the government. I don't know what this infers, but let's think together about a couple of regarding the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, who here, by show of hands, who wants to build a startup? Who knows someone who wants to build a startup? And who's sick of hearing tech, entrepreneur, startup, ecosystem all the time? So let's go ahead with the presentation. When we think of a startup ecosystem, what do we need to build a startup ecosystem? Yeah, so what is composed of the ecosystem?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. Funds, okay. Mentors. Clients. Mentors. Market. Ideas. People. What else? Sorry, talents. Okay. Now we have, incubators, try to catalyze everything that's happening, accelerators, talk about funds, so, business angels, venture capitalists, etc. This is what an ecosystem looks like everywhere. Maybe the most renowned ecosystem is San Francisco and the Silicon Valley. It's inspired, it has inspired everywhere else, to build a similar ecosystem. So in France, it took us maybe a bit more time to start, this process of empowering entrepreneurs, starting new businesses, bringing innovation into the market. And it took us more time, but we have the talent, we have the people, we have the ideas, we have the funds, we have everything. But one thing was missing is the spark. And this is where the government jumped in and said, let's do it. Let's get the spark. So maybe from a US perspective, people think differently about the government. In France, and for once maybe for other things as well, but for the startup ecosystem, the government said, let's give the spark. Let's tell people, let's do it. We can do it, right? Because you need to believe in it. You need to say, we can do it. And this is where the idea of La FrenchTech came from.
Can I suggest something? Yeah. We're trying to tape it on the blue jeans, and I think it's better if you stand next to the mic.
Where's the mic?
Respectfully, it doesn't matter where you
Oh, it doesn't?
You can see the whole
We
front
can
of the
roll.
room.
I'm sorry.
And also the way that it's set up right now, we can't see him.
We've got a camera.
Can you hear him? All we're recording are the slides and including the audio.
Okay, so this is why the government started this initiative called La FrenchTech. So how many of you have heard of La FrenchTech? Or how many of you actually know what La FrenchTech is? Very normal. So La FrenchTech is basically just like the government said, okay, we need to give a push to the people. We need to make them, network together, think together, work together, give a brand to French entrepreneurs. And this is why La FrenchTech was created. It's basically, it has so many levels. There is La FrenchTech, it's a group locally in an ecosystem like Atlanta, and Sébastien will present this to you. La FrenchTech will be a community of entrepreneurs that come together for specific objectives and goals that are defined depending on the city where La FrenchTech is. And there's La Mission FrenchTech in the Ministry of Economy and Finance in France that kind of, works to give a unity to this global network. Listen to the entrepreneurs, know what their needs are, how the government can support, and how we can bring the support to them, if we can bring it. So basically, the idea was to say in 2025, we want to have 25 unicorns. We started very far from that. And we said a unicorn is a startup that's valuated to over $1 billion. So the idea was to say in 2025, we want to have 25 unicorns because it was, going really slow. Just to give you an idea, in 2020, if I'm not mistaken, France had 10 unicorns. Atlanta had 10 unicorns. So, Atlanta and France. So, but now things changed, and in France it's going at a much rapid speed. The government didn't do really the work. It's the entrepreneurs and the VCs that jumped in, the talent that's present, but the government gave the spark, like a catalyzer. To give you an idea of what the ecosystem in France looks like today, we have over 20,000 startups, 5,000 business angels, and 100 VCs that are based in France. 1 million jobs. Now 60% of French students want to become entrepreneurs. I wanted to compare your aspirations with the 60%. So it doesn't quite fit, but maybe. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. The main fields would be health tech, clean tech, agri-tech, and fintech. And I was talking about the unicorns. Now we have 26 unicorns. So only in 2021, there was 11 more. And in 2022, like just the last 2 months, 5 more. So 16 in 2 years, and then 10 in 10 years. So you see the pace is going much faster. Things are happening. And people are starting to, believe that they can do it. It's not something easy. It's not something tough to do. It's it's doable. The same way they can do it in Silicon Valley or in Boston, they can do it in France. 11 billion raised in 2021. It has doubled between 2020 and 2021. To give you an idea, Atlanta, I think in Atlanta it's about 3 billion. And in New York, maybe around 50 billion. So we're still far away, but we're getting there. And over 20 mega rounds. The mega rounds are the rounds that are over 100 million. Maybe you've heard it in the news, 200 million, etc. So all of this has been happening because the government said, let's do it, let's create La FrenchTech. And today, like a French tech network is spread around the world. So we have more than 100 communities in France and abroad. These communities are basically a group of entrepreneurs. So when we say La FrenchTech, we think not only about the companies being French, but the entrepreneurs wanting to do business with France, thinking that there is talent in France that they can capitalize on. There is knowledge that's very important. There are so many great universities and schools. The funds are also there, so why not work with France? And also, when we talk about La FrenchTech, maybe I'll close with this. We kind of defined, a certain vision of the world, certain values, because we are trying to promote a certain tech culture, but not without, the progress and the guarantee of the values that found our society. So this will be maybe a whole new topic, but about data protection and human oversight and everything related to what your cell phone is recording about you. You may have heard of it, like Europe is putting a lot of maybe restrictions on this. Maybe this slows down the progress, but also it protects the people and make sure we protect our values. So I'm not gonna be more long about this. You're going to hear some nice success stories now from the other panelists. So thank you for listening. I'm glad to, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to discuss more. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Rami. Presentations. We're going to keep questions and answers for the end of the program, in the interest of really moving forward. So next we move to, in somewhat a disorganized fashion, seemingly, to Pierre-Marie Rallu, who is a gentleman who has been in Atlanta since 2004 and is an experienced technology entrepreneur, creator of businesses, and maybe one of them will become a licorne, a unicorn. So Pierre-Marie is the CEO and founder of One Retail AI, 20 years of business experience in North America and France, came to Atlanta in 2004. In 2010, he joined BPAC, a French startup, to start U.S. operations. He knows what it means to get something off the ground coming from France in the large continental-sized U.S. context. He's also had experience with Relax, a Finnish firm which raised about $200 million US dollars at its outset, at the start of the company.
500 million last week.
In what?
Another round of 500 million last week.
Wow. Yeah. Are you still with it? No, you're not with it, of course. No regrets?
No. Sorry.
In 2020, he set up his own firm in AI, specialized with a focus on what we call in French la grande distribution, retail. So without further ado, he's got one slide, but it's a slide that could take us the whole day. So I hope you don't take the whole day.
No worries. Thank you, John. Thank you all for being here. Much appreciated. So after Rami, very difficult to go as wide and talking about ecosystems. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of examples which I lived through, just to try to give you some illustration on what we've been and what it's about to be a startup. The examples I took here is the examples I worked with. Those are French companies that's starting in the US. So all of them the same pattern. French company opening an office in the US and starting the operations from scratch. So that's been for all of them. I came in Atlanta in 2004, which makes me officially an old fart. So I came with Aldeda. So Aldeda was a French company headquartered in Paris, back then with operations in Europe. It was already a company back in 2004 when we came in operations, company which was probably about 7 years old. So not really a startup back then, although a fast-growing company. Everything I'm going to talk about is focused on retail tech because that has been my entire experience to focus on the retail segment, especially the supermarkets. And so Aldeda came in. We came in Atlanta because we hired a CEO based here. Very, very, very logical choice. But what you see is that when you work when you're coming from Europe, you need to work with the US, but you're communicating on a daily basis with Europe. So being on the East Coast is much easier than being on the West Coast. You would think about the immediate choice when you come to the US would be to the Silicon Valley, West Coast, San Francisco, because you have all the talents and the pools and so on. But it's actually way more difficult to work on 9 hours time zone difference. So just very practical. Look at the East Coast. Then look at the East Coast. You want to be in Boston. You want to be in New York. You want to be in Atlanta. And then Atlanta is just much warmer. It's much better weather. So just come here. No, but it's cheaper to come in because you have to look at for cost of putting the headquarters, gathering the folks, getting the people, and there are a lot of costs involved into it. And you look at Atlanta. It's got a huge tech potential, obviously, and you're here. And then Atlanta make a lot of sense for Aldeda to start off with. We started the U.S. operations here in 2004. I've been with the company until 2010, and in 2010 we've been acquired by American company. So Symphony Retail AI, which was probably a $2.5 billion organization. What's interesting with the Aldeda experience that we came as a relatively mature company with lots of big clients in Europe, I mean the Carrefour and the Casinos and the Tesco's of the world, and you arrive in the US, and one of the specificities of retail is that it's extremely geo-localized, meaning you can be a big retailer in Europe, you're nobody in the US. Nobody knows Carrefour in the US, and they don't give a shit, by the way. And so you can come with the biggest name and the biggest portfolio and all your experience. You're arriving here and you're starting from scratch. Not true for all the industries. Some industries are crossing over, retail is not. So that's something which is important. But one of the things we've seen with our data, that I've seen with our data, is the growth. So you arrive in the US, you need to have one or two anchor clients to start with. You start working with them because then you get a name, you can broadcast your name, you can brand the name of your clients to make your own brand. But what you see very quickly in the US is that branding is very complex. It's a very noisy market. It's a very large market with lots of opportunities, but a lot of competition and a lot of noise. And so getting through that noise has been the toughest part, I would say, for our data, because they come with the European culture of growing steadily, building your own successes and things like that, where we will see in the next experience that there might be other ways to grow a business in the US. Been acquired successfully in 2010-11 by Symphony. Then I jumped into BPAC. So BPAC was a startup in France as well, based in Aix-en-Provence, in French in the text. Aix-en-Provence, so small startup, probably like 25 people back then in France. So starting the operation, BPAC was created in 2007. The company was about 3 to 4 years old when we started the US operation. So BPAC, same thing, more focused on, so Aldada was focused on supply chain, BPAC was focused on payments and financials, but still for the retail. BPAC, small startup, you got there, you're like, oh wow, you're the first on the market, nobody does that, it's awesome, and then like 6 months later, they threw the companies doing that. And what you realize immediately is that in the US, speed to market is super important, and this is why you need to front load the marketing, you need to front load the money. That's where all the investments are coming in, things like that. And so what we see with BPAC is that we could get finances, and that was back in 2010-11, we can get finances in France back then, but the finances were, everything from $500,000 to $1.5 million, those type of finances. And what you see that this money is burning very, very fast in the US when you start hiring folks at $150K, $250K a year, and then you have a couple of them, well, your $1 million is gone in a nutshell. And when I started BPAC in the US, there was another company, really at the same level, called Coupa back then. And then direct competitor, really head-to-head on the same account and things like that. Over the 5 years when I was starting BPAC, we brought a couple of millions of funding, and Coupa brought 250 million. Well, that makes a difference, in case you have a doubt. But the thing is that what we've seen is that this idea of bringing funding for the retail is really about speeding the growth, not about trying to be more profitable. It's really about growing your market share. That's really the idea. And so BPAC has been acquired in 2016 by a US company as well, so a large publicly traded company in the US that then became Concentric. And Concentric, which is a fairly large company now, has established their entire foundation on the BPAC technology. So the interesting thing is that the technology was really same thing for our data. The technology has become the foundation of their platform. And so when you think about the tech coming from France, all the engineering is coming from France, and back then the money was still coming through a little bit through the US. So there's been some of the experience. And then recently I started with Belive.ai, which is a startup which is started 2 years ago in Amiens, in north of France, for the one who don't know where Amiens is. Even the French people might not know. So Belive started 2 years ago, and Belive, after like 6 months, had already like a 5 million funding in France, French capitals. And so what we see is that, come back to Rami's point, there has been really a spark into the development of the startups. And that was what we call the seed money, which is a very large amount of seed money. And the Series A, which is coming about in the next 2-3 months, is going to be around $25 or $35 million. And that can be half Europe, half US. We're still working on where we're going to get the funds there. But the idea is that it's very easy now, as being a French company, to have access to capitals, where it was not really the case 10 years ago. So that's something which been recently, like a couple of weeks ago, there is another startup that came in Atlanta called Exec, and they just raised $330 million in capital. That become one of the 25th or the 26th unicorn in France. And those funds, which are either it's VC or PE, venture capital or private equity, those funds are much more open to companies outside the US than they used to be like 10, 15 years ago.
There's a lot of questions coming your way.
I hope so. Right in
All right, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alain Lafourcade. Please come right in. Welcome. Alain is somewhat different than the other guys because he's a guy of experience. He's an experienced man.
Say the word Paul?
No. Listen, I think I beat you in that regard. Respect. He's been a CEO for quite a while. He is currently running Fischer Connectors. Now, we asked Alain to be part of this program today, and he accepted generously because he represents an experience of transformation of an enterprise in the field of manufacturing. So Pierre-Marie is very much in the field of retail. Alain is very much in the field of manufacturing, kind of different sides of the industry spectrum. Alain has not only transformed a company in terms of its operations, turning it into a smart set of factory operations, but he has also been acting as a CIO, a CEO in a number of countries. So it's based on that experience that he's here today to share with you what it means to be a French expat. And I guess it's our hope that some of you will become French expat. Hi there. In the process of doing that, really promote French technology in the world, which is, in a sense, what one of your purposes, I guess, in becoming engineers and trained in a different country in the process. So, Alain, without further ado, it's a pleasure to have you here today to share some of your experience, some select tidbits of your experience, because it's an experience that's impressive. So I hope you make an impact on these young folks as they listen to you.
Thank you, John. So, guys, most of you, I will start my presentation today with the international part of it, because most of you, French, already started an international career by studying here in the US. So I don't know if it is your goal to continue to be a world traveler, but I'm French, so obviously you know what it means to be French. And who can tell me, by the way, where I'm born? Marseille, not so far from Aix-en-Provence, by the way, French in the text. But talking about international, I'm married to an English woman, so obviously I have kind of some Britishness, in my attitude. So that's who I am at home with tea time and so on. But for the last 10 years, I've been working for a Swiss company. So in fact, I have a lot of Swissness, and particularly when I say numbers like 70, 80, 90 in France, they don't understand me because I speak Swiss, right? And from a cultural perspective, I've been here for the last 3 years in Georgia. So obviously now I'm the king of barbecue and I love the breaks. So that's in a nutshell who I am. But in fact, for my career, I lived in, there's a missing part here somewhere. But I lived in 15 different countries, lived and worked in 15 different countries. So normally we should see them, but somehow something disappeared. United States being one of them, United Emirates also, but so United, I don't know what's happening here. And from a family perspective, with Catherine, we have 4 kids and born in 4 different countries. So that's really what it is about having an international career and expertise. And I can tell you that's very rewarding, and I will come back on that topic later. Now, I'm not an entrepreneur. Okay, I didn't start my company, and the company I'm working with is not my company. Okay, I'm working as a president of Fischer, but I didn't start that company. And in fact, for many years, I've been an IT guy. And what you see is not really me, but it's what people think of an IT guy in general. The geek guy that's working on a computer with with software and hardware, but most of my time was more CIO. And if you know what CIO means, it's really to organize and to direct a little bit about the strategy in IT and manage big programs, new company implementations, merger and acquisition, carve-out, and all the shared service setup that you can imagine. So it's really about those big projects in IT. And this career brought me, when you are in IT, you have to cover all aspects of an organization because you basically work with every single department, being finance, manufacturing, HR, sales. Anybody will need some IT. Therefore, you are kind of a central point in knowing a lot of things about the entire company. And at the end of the day, involved, you become the president of the company. So here you are, you have a career path, okay? But what is a company? So the company is Fischer Connectors. Once again, I'm not here to sell you anything, by the way, all right? So you're not my customer. But just to show you a little bit about transformation. Now we switch from international to more technology. Fischer Connectors, sounds very American, but it's Swiss. And connectors, obviously, you can imagine making connectors. Very sexy, right? You all want to do this in your life. So, in fact, instead of saying we do connectors, we do connectivity solutions. More, sexy, but in fact it means something because we started as connectors, but a connector without a cable at the end doesn't mean anything, so we do also cables, the cable assemblies. But if I tell you today, you have $10,000 to invest in my company, we do connectors and cables, that's the future, right? Nobody will follow me because everything goes wireless, right? So why the hell would you invest in a company making cables and connectors? So we know that. So obviously we need to transform ourselves. And connectivity is crucial for tomorrow. I mean, the world is connected. You hear about metaverse, you hear about communication, you have your phone with you. Nothing works without connectivity. And you need connectivity, and you need connectors, by the way. Everywhere in this room you will find connectors still, and cables. Because the wireless need still connectors and cables. So we do a lot of electronics as well. So that has been the transformation, moving to, we are expert in connectors, we are expert in cables. In fact, we are expert in connectivities, no matter what the media is. And here in the US, we have 150 employees in the north of Atlanta, Alpharetta, or if you know. It's not only sales, it's we manufacture our products here. I mean, the connectors are made in Switzerland, but everything else, electronics and cable assemblies, are made here in the US. We work mostly in medical, defense, industry, everywhere where you have a mix of many different protocols and where you need really ruggedness. We are not selling cheap connectors. We are not much in the automotive industry, for example, because you have connectors in your cars, but typically they are plastic connectors that you click once and you forget. You never remove it, or maybe twice or three times in the lifetime of the car, while we have to guarantee our connector to be able to click and unclick, what's called mating and mating, 10,000 times. So the automotive industry is not ready to buy that. And these two, by the way, represent 70%. So defense and medical represent 70% of our sales. That's not our revenue, I wish, but it's not, right? That's a market size. So you see when we said connectivity doesn't seem very sexy, it's a $62 billion market. So every year, that market represents $62 billion. So we only have a very small part of it, but it's still a gigantic market. And finally, from a group perspective, so I said it's a Swiss company, we are manufacturing and sales in many countries around the world. The US organization only represents 50% of the sales. So that brings me to the last part of the presentation, which is about the attractiveness of the US. So I'm not going against Rami to say, okay, promoting France, but also to say, entrepreneur is about where do you want to make your business, and we see a lot of, you will be here to present the attractiveness of Atlanta from a FrenchTech perspective, but it's important to understand why the US is so big for us. And I will just show two markets. The defense market, first of all. That's the defense budget, all right? The defense budget in the US is equal to the 10 next countries behind the US, okay? So that's gigantic, once again. And if you work in that market, you will always find customers buying products ready for ideas and so on. ideas, by the way. We're talking about startups and entrepreneurs. And the first thing that comes to mind is you need an idea. You need to innovate. I mean, innovation is not only for startups. Innovation can happen also in big companies because you need to adapt yourself, all right? So if Fischer is only concentrating on making those small round connectors like we did 50 or 65 years ago, well, that won't change. I mean, we will be dead in a very little while. So you constantly need to innovate, being in a startup or being in a big company. And then you can get funds because, as you mentioned also, that the pockets are much wider. Everything is big in the US. The cars are big, the portion in the restaurant are big, but the pockets are also very big sometimes. And the investors put a lot of money, even in the defense or mostly in the defense market, to help develop ideas and innovations. The second market I want to show is medical. So that's a medical technology market, not budget, because there's not a budget as such, but the market size. And you can see that it's very similar to defense. So I can smell the pizza, so I know that I need to go very quick because it will generate some reaction here. So, but you see the size of the market is also huge, and explain why for Fischer the attractiveness of the US is important, because one company versus the rest of the world represent half of the group, and that demonstrated just by the size of the markets here. And I wanted to finish on some feedback about, you said under the hood, was the title, and I wanted to give 5 clues. First of all, the made in the US. France and French are well known for their chauvinism, right? We are, France is the best. Well, I don't know if it's the same still, but I've been so, I don't remember when last time I was in France, by the way, but that's, the cliche about the French guys. But every country is very proud of who they are, right? And made in the US is also very important here, particularly when you work in some of the markets like defense and medical. I mean, for defense purposes, you need to be made in the US anyway, right? So, you will never see how many American flags in the gardens here than you will see French flags in the garden in France, because I don't think anybody has a flag in the garden. Maybe the mayor, I don't know. But, it's made in the US is an important thing. Price versus quality. We're a Swiss product, and Swiss is not really known as being a cheap country, right? So they make expensive watches, big banks, chocolate, but not very well known for their industry because it's an expensive country. Therefore, you need to find a market who is ready to pay the price for the quality. And the US is a typical country where you see that people recognize the value of things, not only the price, but the value. And there's a big difference between the price and the value. And I think it's important to recognize that. And I've been living in Europe and Asia, and I can tell you that in Asia, at least at the time where I was there, it's all about the price. It's not about the value, And in Europe, I think there's kind of a shift coming where the value is a bit more important than the price, but still, we still have our old, fashioned way of thinking and trying to squeeze the price as much as possible, while my feeling is here, the value is something much more valuated. Finally, entrepreneurship. So change color because more from a personal and experience or career perspective. Hopefully things are changing because of the spark, but I think that in the US you have more this, experience, and everybody mentioned it about the fact that people want to be entrepreneur. In my generation, right? So it was 10 generation back from you. In my generation, almost success. You have to be ashamed if you succeeded, right? You have to be a low profile and so on. While now, in the US, success is something you want to show and people admire you, right? So now I think that needs to change, and it's a cultural thing. And I think it's a difficult exercise for a country to change and to accept that success is something you can be proud of, right? Culture, I think that culture is a no-brainer. There is no big difference. You guys, you are born and you see the same thing as all the young people here in the US, as the young people in Europe or in Asia, because the world is so connected that social media is the same everywhere. And I think that the shift of the difference in culture is completely gone. So I don't know if you can confirm that. You have been studying in France and now in the US. Do you see a big difference in culture between the two countries? A little bit? All right, good to know. But at least from a company perspective, I would say that in the past there was quite a big difference in the way you address people, you manage people, because culture is about relationship for me. It's more about the way to handle people, and I think that gap has closed rapidly. I'm not talking about Asia, but really between Europe and the US. And finally, lifestyle. You already mentioned it, it's warmer here, but it's a nice area to be in, and to at the end of the day, if you live like me in different countries, everywhere they tell you, oh, you need to see that. That's wonderful. And every country has a very wonderful part. France has wonderful parts. Asia has wonderful parts. US has wonderful parts. So everywhere, if you want to be happy, you can be happy anywhere, everywhere. And I think that Georgia has a pretty good landscape and a pretty good weather. You won't find the Alps though, so don't expect to be a lot of skiing here. But for the rest, it's a good part to be. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for showcasing some of the salient differences. Young people confirm that the differences are still present with us. I hope. Okay, the next and last but not least, the ideal person to close ranks, as it were, my friend Sebastien Lafon, trade advisor to the French government, CCE, currently the president of the Atlanta chapter of FrenchTech. The Atlanta chapter being one of the last but not least chapters created in the United States. And I always wanted Atlanta to do it before Miami, but somehow Miami beat us to it, even though they haven't got half the technology we have in Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. In any case, Sébastien has a great deal of experience. He's the founder and CEO of Adapt First. It's a consulting company focused on large-scale corporate digital transformation. He's written on that, participated in various venues at Georgia Tech, study groups and so on. But he also has experience with large firms. He's the former global VP Digital and Marketing Services for Boehringer Ingelheim, previously CFO for Merial Sanofi North American Business Operation. He's a graduate of Kedge Business School. No, you're all in engineering, but Kedge Business School is a well-known business school in France. I work a lot with them. Also has gone to pursue studies in the UK, and also is a graduate of the Exec education program at Harvard, Cambridge on Massachusetts, on the Charles River. So without further ado, Mr. President of Atlanta Tech, the floor is yours. Tell us more about what's going on.
Thank you. So I know I'm standing between now and the pizza, so I will stop. It smells really good. You've heard many stories. You heard, I think, one of the most fascinating story of the morning is the transformation of France. I was very passionate about transformation of an organization. So I was in a pharma business, 100 years experience in building vaccines and pharma product. And you have to move them as a tech company or a software company. You've heard the story. If you're not a software company, you're not a company anymore. And that's very hard to do it at a company level. Fischer is a good example. You have to transform, making connectors to being connected wireless, maybe. This is a very, very hard exercise. And what we've seen in about 6-7 years is like a transformation of France under the brand La FrenchTech. And we've seen an example from Pierre-Marie where actually you've seen the story across the years, like year 2004 being very hard to raise 1 million to, slowly increasing, investment, 5 million. And now we're hearing Exotech, I think the final one, raising 500 million. So, being able to change a culture and inspire a lot of you either to become entrepreneur or work and now have access to work in those of companies, I think is a fantastic story. On my side, I left France very early to work in the UK, in Ireland, and then in the US, because in France there were not that current optimism and entrepreneurship. I had to go outside to really, experience that energy. So I think it's a really cool story that La FrenchTech offers a lot of opportunity for you, and we'll talk about that and the role we play in Atlanta. So we've talked a little bit about La FrenchTech as a big initiative in France. So we are trying to play, in Atlanta, and we're sorry we are here in Miami, but at least we have La FrenchTech in Atlanta. It's a fantastic ecosystem. You've heard it, cost of living. It's warm. The Atlanta airport, if you have to work with Europe, is actually spectacular, but if you have to work in the US as well, it's very convenient. I think we didn't mention enough access to top talent. You are here at Georgia Tech, very prestigious. MIT is only the Georgia Tech of the North, and Emory University. Many others. The ecosystem is extremely attractive. You've seen it in the news. Tech companies in the US on the West Coast or in the Northeast are moving to Atlanta to access that top talent because of the cost of living, because of the ability to retain that talent. As a funny story, when I arrived in Georgia, I was crying. After London, Dublin, France, I cried. I said, I'm not going to stay here for 18 months. It's going to be way too long. I ended up to be there more than 20 years, which I don't know what makes me after the old fart story, but it's a very, very attractive place. So what we are trying to do now is to connect, increase that ecosystem. You've heard about the top, the Fortune 500 companies. You've heard about that startup ecosystems. Last year was 4 unicorns in Atlanta. Many incubators like ATDC and Atlanta Tech Village and Curiosity Lab, where we are based as FrenchTech Atlanta. So our mission is when a French company that wants to become a unicorn, it's very hard to do without the US market, as explained by Alain. We want them to think about Atlanta. And today they are not necessarily thinking about Atlanta. So Rami helped us to put the story together, but we want to help those French companies to be their help to have a soft landing. Pierre-Marie explained, it's very hard to come in the US. You have different culture, you have different branding issues, you have, the scaling up is very hard. So we want to be that place where they can connect with entrepreneurs like Pierre-Marie or others. They have direct access with our people that supported us during that process of being accredited as FrenchTech, but Georgia Tech was a big help, but we are very well connected with the city of Atlanta, Atlanta Metro Chamber. So we are helping them to accelerate their growth in the US. Our primary job is, I think, to support those French startups, but equally important, we are promoting the US, the Atlanta ecosystem to France as well, to have this share of mind when they think about coming to the United States. So we are organized by chapters, so this is the team, but what's most important is the community lead, so something that we can talk about. You've seen I like Tech for Good is a way to talk about a lot of things, but in France where, whether it's health tech, agri-tech, retail tech, fintech, you've heard about all those buzzwords flying. So we are organized on the different community leads, and we're creating events in Atlanta to promote the ecosystem and encourage the relationship between the two countries. We have some flagship events. So one of the big events that we have every year is called France Atlanta. Georgia Tech is a big sponsor of it, one of the lead driver with the consulate, with the French-American Chamber of Commerce that we are part of. And we usually have events around culture, science, also business. And you can connect to the website, but we have done events around fintech and agtech and a lot of different things. So that's one way where we play. You heard about mentorship. So, one way we play is to connect the French entrepreneurs to mentors. The French Trade Advisors is a group of like 30 people in the Southeast, and John McIntyre is part of it, is one of the leader of that organization. And we have some mentorship program with the French Trade Advisors. We are recognizing the companies as a part of France Atlanta that are making the best investment in France, but the French companies that are making big investments in Atlanta as well, or in the area. So that's the event you have at the bottom. We are going to create, probably, the ambition is to create a pitch for the students and part of that France Atlanta event. So you'll probably hear more about it. We encourage you to have ideas, and it's going to be a pitch competition probably in October this year. So the startups ecosystem in Atlanta from France, I mean, one has a quite amazing story. It's called Sunday. I don't know if you heard about Sunday. Anyone has heard Sunday? One? You could use it. If you go to the restaurants, there's going to be a QR code on your table, and you flash the QR code, and you can wait to split the bill or make your payments. Touchless, you don't have to be involved with anyone, super fast. So that company is an interesting story. It was created last year, in March. In September, or I think just before September, August, they raised $100 million. By the end of the year, they had more than 500 employees, started in March. So the founders are in France, in the UK. The COO is based in Atlanta. She has a big experience in the tech. She was the CEO of Mano Mano. You may have heard about it as well. So these are the type of startups that are very expressive, and this new energy that we're seeing coming in Atlanta. We've been, another story, one of the supporters, I cannot classify them as much as a startup, is OVH Cloud. So who has heard about OVH Cloud? So OVH Cloud is, one of the top 10 cloud providers. It's one of the only European company in the top 10. It's French. And we have discussion with them very frequently. What are they looking for to grow in the US? In your opinion? What are they looking for right now? They're looking for people like you. They're looking for talent. It's not funding the issue. They are publicly traded. They went through an IPO. They have the funding. They are looking for people like you. And the discussion is like, I need my unicorn. I need someone that has a tech expertise. I need someone that understands business. And I need someone that has some kind of cultural affinity with Europe. Well, I'm going to talk to a bunch of people next week that probably has those characteristics. So FrenchTech, if we summarize, what happened in France, what's happening here, is that it gives a lot of opportunity for you if you want to become an entrepreneur. Or if you are seeking, just a job, which I'm sure you will at some point, unless you are some of the fortunate ones that don't have to. But so that FrenchTech has been, to me, an amazing story of transformation at the country level, very powerful energy behind it. We are looking forward, if you want to participate to some of the events, you want to take the lead on the community side, feel free to reach out. We are part of the French American Chamber of Commerce, and we'd love to, hear more from you and connect you with the companies that are looking for talent. Thank you for your time.